My name is Myra Andis. I'm 32. The night my sister's fiancé called my mom trailer park trash, I was already 6 months into building the federal case that would eventually send him to prison. We were standing in the Sterling family's foyer, marble floors, crystal chandelier. My mom wore her best denim jacket, pressed twice. Trent Sterling stood nearby in a $400 polo. He thought I couldn't hear him whispering to his groomsmen behind the screen beside the bar. He was wrong. My mother is the strongest woman I've ever known. She raised 2 daughters on a 47-acre farm in Berks County, Pennsylvania. After my father died from a heart attack in 2014, she survived one brutal winter on canned green beans and sheer pride alone. And one Saturday in June, the man my sister planned to marry whispered 14 words that started a clock ticking. What I did over the next 6 months, and what happened at the altar, is something the Berks County Chronicle still writes about. But the only person who ever truly knew the whole plan was my mom. And even she didn't know every piece of it. Welcome back to the channel. This is where we tell the slow, satisfying revenge stories. The kind where decent people stop being polite and start using the truth. If you're new here, hit subscribe, tap the bell, and drop a comment with one word telling me where you're listening from. I read every single one. Now, back to that foyer. I picked Mom up from the farmhouse at 4 that afternoon. Dinner started at 6. The drive to Chester County took about 40 minutes. She stepped onto the porch wearing the denim jacket she had ironed herself and the same navy blouse she wore to my law school graduation. Her hair was pinned neatly up. The wedding band from my father's funeral hung from a thin gold chain around her neck. "Do I look okay?" she asked. "You look like my mom." She smiled softly and climbed into the Ford Escape. The sun hung low in the sky. The fields along Route 422 glowed with that deep late June green that makes you forget winter was ever real. We barely spoke during the drive. Mom and I have always known how to sit in silence together. What she didn't know was that I'd spent the last 6 months pulling title records on the Sterling family. That I'd flagged 3 shell LLCs connected to the same Reading post office box as Sterling Development Group. That there was a thick manila folder sitting in the trunk of my car. Not for the dinner. For afterward. I'd been suspicious from the beginning. The first time Hannah brought Trent home, Thanksgiving last year, he asked my mother 4 different questions about the acreage, the North Pasture Access Road, and whether the property had ever been surveyed for utilities. He smiled the entire time and called her Mrs. Andis. Mom thought he was being respectful. He wasn't being respectful. He was conducting due diligence. By then, I'd been an agricultural land use attorney for 8 years. I ran a solo practice in Reading. Most of my clients were dairy farmers and small landowners fighting easement disputes. I'd seen enough land deals to recognize exactly what a fishing question sounded like. I never told Hannah. Hannah was in love. Hannah was 27 and had spent most of her 20s working as a paralegal in my office, paying down student loans, dating men who constantly borrowed money from her. Trent looked like the solution to every problem she'd ever had. By the time we turned into the Sterling driveway, the folder was still sitting in my trunk. Waiting. The driveway curved nearly a quarter-mile through rows of perfectly manicured oaks. A teenage boy in a vest took my keys at the front steps. 24 cars already filled the circular drive. Range Rovers. Autos. A vintage Mercedes the color of cream. Inside, the foyer opened into a great room with 20-foot ceilings, marble floors, and a staircase that curled upward like ribbon. Rosalind Sterling stood by the entrance air-kissing women in pearls. "Eliza," she said brightly, taking my mother's hands. "What a darling jacket. So practical." "Thank you," Mom replied calmly. She didn't take the bait. She never had a day in her life. Whitfield Sterling Sr. approached next. 62 years old, silver at the temples, wearing a navy blazer with brass buttons. His handshake landed too hard. His eyes dropped to my mother's hands and stayed there half a second too long. Her hands are rough, broad-palmed, stronger than mine. She's tapped maple trees for 30 years. "Mrs. Andis," he said, "we've been looking forward to meeting you." "Likewise," Mom answered evenly. Hannah appeared at the top of the staircase wearing a champagne-colored cocktail dress. She looked radiant, but I noticed something the moment she stepped down. The faintest trace of doubt behind her eyes. like the flame inside a candle had flickered once. I stored that away. I excused myself to the powder room and took the longer route back, passing a wall covered in family photographs. One stopped me cold. Whitfield Sr. shaking hands with a man in a flannel jacket outside the Berks County Courthouse. The brass plate beneath it read, "With Commissioner Earl Mallister, August 2023. Earl Mallister, the county commissioner who voted on every land use permit in our district." I knew his name from at least 12 client files. I stored that away, too. By the time I returned to Mom in the great room, I had 3 things on my mental list. The photograph, the way Whitfield Sr. stared at my mother's hands, and the look in Hannah's eyes. 3 things. None of them good. Cocktails were served on the back terrace. Servers in white shirts carried trays of champagne and miniature crab cakes. Mom held a glass of seltzer. She never drinks in unfamiliar houses. I told her I'd be right back and slipped inside to find the bathroom. The downstairs powder room was occupied, so I cut through the den toward the second one near the kitchen. There was a folding screen near the wet bar, Japanese gold leaf, and as I rounded it, I heard 2 men talking on the other side. Trent and one of his groomsmen, Brad. Trent held a tumbler filled with something dark. His tie hung loose. His words already sounded soft around the edges. "Christ, man," he muttered. "Her mom looks like she belongs in a trailer park." Brad laughed. "Hannah's lucky she got cleaned up before college. I keep waiting for the mom to start talking about coupons or something." Brad laughed again. Trent took another sip. "Yeah. Well, 12 more months." I went still. Not frozen. Still. There's a difference. 12 more months. Hannah had met Trent 8 months earlier. The wedding was 6 months away. Roughly a 12-month timeline from beginning to end. A timeline to what? I stepped backward behind the screen so they wouldn't see me, then walked the long way around through the dining room and back onto the terrace from the opposite entrance. Mom stood alone beside the fire pit. Her untouched seltzer glass rested in her hand. Her face had changed. Not shuttered. Dropped. Like fabric falling the second someone lets go of it. A server had walked past laughing nearby, and she had heard enough. Maybe not Trent's exact words, but enough. Mothers always know. She turned toward me quietly. "Honey," she said, "I think I'll wait in the car." I reached for her arm gently, the way you touch someone you love when you're about to tell them not to flinch. "Don't leave yet, Mom," I said softly. "I already have a plan." She looked at me for a long moment without speaking. She never asked what the plan was. That was the part that almost broke me. I walked her back into the great room with my hand resting lightly against the small of her back. She moved the way she always moves, straight-backed, calm, unhurried. Once, she touched the gold chain at her neck and ran her thumb across my father's wedding band before lowering her hand again. I'd seen her make that gesture 1,000 times. It's what she does when she studies herself. That night, I finally understood. She was bringing my father into the room with her. "Eliza, there you are," Rosalind called brightly. "We're sitting down." 28 guests sat around a single long table, decorated with lemon and pewter centerpieces. 3 wine glasses waited at every setting. Mom and I were seated beside Hannah and directly across from Whitfield Sr. and his wife. Trent sat one chair down between his mother and an elderly aunt. Whitfield Sr. stood for the toast. "To our 2 families," he announced, lifting his glass. "Welcome to the home you'll be visiting often. May our 2 great families and our properties grow together for many years to come." A few guests laughed politely. My mother's expression never changed. And I noticed 3 things about that toast. He had said properties, not assets, not shared life. Properties. And he had repeated the word families in a way that felt like he was correcting himself mid-sentence. His eyes had lingered on the painting above the mantel, a wide aerial view of farmland, right as he said, "Grow together." The real proof wasn't in his toast. The proof was in the trunk of my car. The proof was in the LLC filings I had pulled 3 weeks earlier. The proof was sitting quietly across the table, breathing like nothing was wrong. Hannah's eyes met mine. She held them for 2 full seconds. Then her lip trembled, just slightly. The kind of movement someone makes when they're fighting tears in public. She didn't know everything yet, but she knew enough. The dinner ended at 10:14. By 10:20, as we walked toward the valet stand, my phone buzzed inside my clutch. Hannah. 3 words. We need to talk. I told Mom I'd be a minute. I told her to wait in the passenger seat. I walked off toward the side of the driveway where the catering trucks were parked, just out of sight of the valet stand. Hannah came around the corner 3 minutes later, barefoot, champagne dress in hand, heels dangling from her fingers. She didn't greet me. Myra, she said. I think Trent doesn't love me. Her voice was thin. Not crying yet. Just fragile. I think he wants something else. I've been finding receipts. I know, I said. I've known for 6 months. She froze. What? I didn't tell you because if he caught even a hint of it, he would have panicked. I needed time. To be sure. And to build it. Silence stretched between us. The freezer unit on the catering truck hummed in the background. What did you build? She finally asked. So I told her. About the LLCs. About the title records. About the questions Trent asked Mom at Thanksgiving, especially the one about the North Pasture access road that nobody else had thought twice about. About the photograph in the hallway, Whitfield Sr. shaking hands with Commissioner Mallister. As I spoke, her expression changed. The hurt didn't just fade. It drained out completely. Something colder took its place. Sharper. Myra, she said quietly, I want to walk down the aisle. I blinked. What? I want him at the altar. I want his parents in the front row. I want 200 people there when it breaks. I stared at her, my quiet, careful sister, the paralegal I had always thought was soft at the edges. That's a lot of room, I said. That's the point. Her gaze drifted toward the driveway, where Mom sat waiting in the passenger seat of my Ford Escape, chain at her neck, calloused hands folded calmly, holding herself together with quiet dignity. Myra, Hannah said, I'm a paralegal. I know how to photograph documents. The wedding was 6 months away. Okay, I said. Then we billed. The drive back to the farm took 42 minutes. Mom didn't ask why I had been gone near the catering trucks. She didn't ask about Hannah. She just sat quietly in the passenger seat, watching cornfields slide past under a thin June moon. I've known my mother my entire life. I know her silences. This one was different. This was the silence of someone waiting to hear the truth. Mom, I said about 15 minutes into the drive. I'd rather lose the dinner than fight rich people, she had murmured earlier in the night. She turned her head. What? That's what you said on the way there. I heard you. I just want to say, Mom, we're not fighting them for me. My hand tightened on the steering wheel. We're fighting them for the farm. She didn't respond right away. The road climbed out of Chester County, rolling into dark hills, past the dairy on Route 23, past the abandoned silo my father and I used to wave at when I was a child. What do you mean? She finally asked. I'll explain when I'm ready. I still need a few more pieces. But I need you to do one thing. She waited. Smile at the bridal shower. Smile at the rehearsal. And don't say a word about tonight. Not to Hannah. Not to anyone. She nodded once. I trust you. That trust ran deep, decades deep. It came from kitchen tables on Cedar Hollow Road. From her braiding my hair before first grade. From sitting beside me at my father's funeral when I was 20 and holding my hand for 4 straight hours without letting go. She had always trusted me with what mattered. As we turned into the gravel driveway, she said softly, Honey, your father would have been proud of you tonight. I stared straight ahead. I didn't let the tears fall. That would come later. Because now there was work. And the farm wasn't symbolic. It was everything. By morning, Mom would understand, but not yet. Saturday morning. 6:30. I sat at my kitchen table and reading with a mug of coffee and a manila folder spread open in front of me. My father, Luis, died of a heart attack in March 2014. He was 56. He had been splitting firewood beside the barn when it happened. He left my mother 47 acres of working farmland his father had purchased in 1948 for $94 an acre. The original deed still hung framed in the farmhouse hallway. I had looked at it every Sunday of my life. Mom's annual income from the farm was $58,000. $20,000 came from a CSA program, 60 families in Berks County paying for weekly produce boxes from May through October. The rest came from maple syrup. 80 tapped trees producing roughly 240 gallons a year, sold at Lancaster farmers markets and through a small online list. She lived simply. The mortgage was paid off in 2011. The truck was a 2007 F-150. Heat came from wood in the winter. She loved the land. I knew she would never leave it. I opened the folder. On top was a printout from the Pennsylvania Bureau of Land Records, pulled 3 weeks earlier on instinct. An LLC *Heritage Acres Holdings * had filed a notice of interest on the parcel bordering my mother's eastern fence line. Filed in February. Parent entity, Sterling Development Group. Trent had asked questions about the North Pasture Access Road at Thanksgiving. Hannah had met him 2 weeks before that. The land filing came in May. The wedding was scheduled for December. 12 months total. Start to finish. And in January, the Pennsylvania Department of Transportation would release its 3-year highway expansion plan. That was the window. That was the timing. That was the plan. Hannah came by Sunday afternoon. She wore jeans and the gray cardigan I had given her for her last birthday. She brought 2 deli sandwiches and her laptop. A small leather notebook sat beside her with a pen clipped neatly to it. We sat at the kitchen table. I pushed the folder aside. "Here's what we need," I said. 4 things. She wrote as I spoke. State pre-planning documents. Any internal memo confirming the I-78 East extension. Sterling Development corporate filings. Every LLC, every subsidiary. Earl Mallister's voting record on land use permits. And the prenuptial agreement Trent's lawyer will send you. She numbered them 1, 2, 3, 4. I can get the prenup when it comes, she said. And probably parts of Sterling's filings. Trent leaves printouts everywhere. He's careless. What about his email? He prints things, she said. Doesn't trust the cloud. Old money paranoia. I studied hard. My sister, 27, paralegal, 4 years in my office. Calm hands, focused eyes, already thinking like a strategist. How long have you been suspicious? I asked. 8 weeks. She paused. He asked me to sign a power of attorney. Said it was for joint legal matters. I told him I'd review it with you. He said he didn't want lawyers involved in the marriage. That was the first sign. She nodded. There were others. He asked twice about Mom's will. Whether the farm was left to both of us or just one. He called it estate planning. That wasn't estate planning, I said. That was inventory. She looked down. Yeah. You should have told me. I was going to. I just didn't want to be wrong. I placed both hands flat on the table. Okay. Code phrase. When I text, "How's the centerpiece?" it means check his desk. Photograph everything. Timestamps on. Location on. She nodded. Then she reached for her phone. "Myra," she said, "I already have something." She turned the screen toward me. 14 photos. The first showed a manila folder on Trent's desk. The label on it read, "Target Parcels." I scrolled. The second photograph showed an aerial image of my mother's farm. The 47 acres along the eastern fence line were outlined in thick red Sharpie. In the margin, handwritten notes read, $3, $200 per acre purchase, estimated right-of-way premium, $180,000 per acre, net $8.40 million, $8.4 million. I read it 3 times. The first time it was just a number. The second time it turned into anger. The third time it looked like a line in an indictment. The next image was a printed email. Trent to W.S. Sr., dated 3 months ago. Subject, update going well. She's already attached. Mom likes the down-home angle. Should be locked in by June. She was Hannah. Locked in meant a wedding, a prenup, and a property transfer. Mom likes the down-home angle was Rosalind's strategy, warmth aimed at the farmer's widow. Hannah swallowed hard. Her hand shook slightly around the phone. "I want to throw up," she said. "Don't," I replied. "Keep eating dinner with him. Keep laughing at his jokes. We're not finished. Now we have motive. We need 3 more things, and a witness that matters. A witness. FBI." She looked up at me. "You know someone?" "I went to law school with someone. She's at the Philadelphia field office, Public Corruption Unit. I'll reach out tomorrow. Hannah set the phone down and stared at the ceiling, then back at me. How long do I have to keep pretending I'm in love with him? 8 months. She closed her eyes, then opened them again. Okay. She stood, walked to the sink, washed her hands, dried them on a dish towel. Then she turned back to me. I already have a plan, Myra, she said. I want it at the altar. The words echoed back to me, from that sterling driveway. Now the plan had shape. And a date. Late July. A Saturday morning. 91 degrees and bright. I drove to the farm to help Mom with mid-season maple inventory, counting taps, checking lines, replacing cracked spiles from winter damage. She came out of the back door in field boots and a sun-faded t-shirt, hair pinned up, clipboard in hand. Honey, she said, come look at the fence line first. We walked east, past the kitchen garden, past 2 small ponds, past the rusted gate where my father used to lean with his coffee on summer mornings. The eastern fence line marked the edge of the 47 acres, land his father had bought in 1991 with savings that took years of sacrifice. 3 bright orange survey ribbons fluttered in the wind. Each was tied to wooden stakes driven just outside the fence, on the boundary touching her land. I recognized the markings immediately. DP State Department of Transportation pre-survey. Mom stared at them. I never gave anyone permission to survey, she said quietly. Did the county notify you? No. I pulled out my phone and photographed each ribbon, logging GPS coordinates, date, and time. I stored everything, digitally and mentally. On the drive back, I called Earl Mallister's office. His secretary answered. I asked casually whether the county had approved any survey on the property. She said. That was a courtesy survey from the state. Commissioner approved it last month. Approved it. Without owner consent. That wasn't courtesy. That was trespass. And that was the moment it stopped being local. That was the moment it became federal. You don't mark another person's land without permission. That's how I knew they'd already started taking it. Maya Caldwell and I had sat across from each other in law school in 2014. Civ Pro Evidence Clinic, 3 semesters side by side. She went federal. I went solo. We stayed in touch. I emailed her Sunday night. Subject: asterisk, need to buy you breakfast. Not a client thing, asterisk. She replied in 10 minutes. Asterisk Saturday. 7 a.m. Potsdam Diner, asterisk. I brought the folder. We sat in a back booth. She ordered a Western omelet. I took black coffee. I slid the folder across. She read for 15 minutes without speaking. Her food went cold. When she reached the email, asterisk locked in by June asterisk, she stopped chewing entirely and reread it twice. Myra, she said. Yeah. This is wire fraud. I know. The interstate communication is enough. The LLC structure shows intent. If you can confirm Mallister had insider knowledge of an unannounced DOT project, we're in public corruption territory too. She closed the folder. I need 3 more things before I open a case. 1. Documented voting pattern from Mallister, especially land permits in the I-78 corridor. 2. The actual prenuptial agreement. 3. Whitfield Sr. confirming this in writing, in person, or through a traceable document trail. We'll have all 3 before November. That's confidence. My sister is inside. Maya studied me for a moment. How old? 27. Paralegal. 5 years in my office. She nodded slowly. I'll open a preliminary file Monday. Don't tell your mother. Don't tell anyone. She stood, then paused, sitting back down again. If you bring me a smoking gun before the wedding, she said, I can have arrest warrants ready that morning. I didn't smile. I just nodded. Late August. Hannah went to the Sterling family lake cabin in the Poconos with Trent for the weekend. Friday afternoon, she texted from the driveway. Whitfield Sr. just arrived unannounced. I replied, eyes open. That night she messaged again. She had been reading on the back deck when she heard voices from Trent's office. Window open. No whispering, arguing. Whitfield Sr. said January twice. She waited until they went to the dock for cigars. Then she went inside. Trent's office. Desk. Humidor on top. Locked drawer beneath. Key in the pencil cup. Of course it was. She opened it. A manila folder, 3 inches thick. Label I-7080/NS/Phase 2. She photographed every page. 17 total. Replaced everything exactly as found. Returned the key. Went back outside. Drove home Sunday. Texted me from a rest stop on Route 81. I have it. Sunday night. 11 p.m. I printed all 17 pages. Page 1. Pennsylvania DOT Internal Memo. Asterisk Pre-Public Commissioner Review. Only star. April date. It outlined an I-78 East extension through Berks County, right-of-way cutting directly through my mother's 47 acres. Page 2. Draft Purchase Agreement. Sterling Development Group as buyer. My mother's parcel as seller. Price, $3,200 per acre. Pages 3 through 15. Prenup draft, unseen by Hannah. Page 16. Profit projection. Net gain after resale of right-of-way, $8.4 million. Page 17. Yellow legal pad note in Whitfield Sr.'s handwriting. Earl gets 15%. I sat there for an hour without moving. That page alone would end him. I just didn't know how yet. Tuesday noon. Philadelphia. Maya read everything again. Ribbon photos, title chain, voting records. Mal Lister had approved every Sterling-linked application in the past 3 years. 22 votes. 0 recusals. Despite being Whitfield Sr.'s first cousin. She leaned back after 45 minutes. Myra, she said, this is the case. I know. Wire fraud. Conspiracy. Honest services fraud. Bribery of a public official. That handwritten note alone is enough for conviction. She closed the stack. How do you want to do this? I leaned back. The wedding. December 14th. 200 guests. 3 families under one roof. My sister at the altar. An FBI agent embedded as her guest. Sheriff Holland in the sacristy. And Mal Lister? Arrested at his home in Reading. Same hour. She watched me for a long moment. You want maximum reputational damage? She asked. I want the truth to break in the room where they plan to bury it. She didn't respond for 10 seconds. Her gaze drifted to the window, then returned to me. All right, she said finally. I'll be at the wedding. Plus one of Hannah's bridesmaids. We already built a college cover story. She paused. I've copied everything. Your originals stay in your manila folder. That folder wasn't just an investigation anymore. It was a federal evidence packet. Maya already had a duplicate locked in a secure file at the Philadelphia field office by Wednesday morning. I drove home Tuesday night and cried for the first time in 8 months. Not out of grief, but from the strange clarity of what was coming. There were 97 days left until the wedding. 2 things were still missing. The prenuptial agreement itself, and a county commissioner willing to lie on record and on camera. The bridal shower was the second Saturday in September at the Sterling estate. 60 guests. 3 shades of pink balloons. A white backyard tent. Rosalind hosting in a linen dress. Diamond studs the size of peas. Mom wore a navy dress from Talbot's that I had helped her pick. Pearls from Aunt Beth, given in 1989, rested at her collar. She didn't look Sterling elegant. She looked Berks County strong. I drove her in. We arrived at 1 p.m. Rosalind met us at the patio steps with champagne and air kisses on both cheeks. Eliza, you clean up so well, she said. Hannah told us you were a farmer. We were picturing, well, you know. A few women nearby laughed politely. Mom didn't hesitate. I am still a farmer, she said. I just changed my shoes. The laughter faded quickly. 2 women turned away. One B, who I later learned ran a horse rescue, actually smiled at her. Genuinely. I guided Mom toward the food table. The next 2 hours became a rotation of questions. Hannah's bridesmaids, Sarah and Kelsey, asked about maple production, the sap house, the evaporator. Mom explained it patiently. The first run in February, she said, smells like candle wax and cold wood smoke. For a moment, she wasn't out of place at all. She was the calm center of the room. Across the lawn, Hannah caught my eye and tilted her head toward the house. 5 minutes later, we met upstairs in the guest bathroom. She handed me her phone. A photo, stationery from Rosalind's desk. A guest list with handwritten notes. Next to Eliza, 2 words. We're modest. I looked at Hannah. Save it, I said. We'll use it in the slideshow. She didn't laugh. Neither did I. We went back downstairs separately. I scheduled an appointment with Commissioner Earl Mallister for the 3rd Wednesday in October. The reason was legitimate. A dairy client in Maxitani was fighting an easement dispute, and I needed permitting clarification. A standard 15-minute meeting. One I had done 100 times. Mallister met me in the front office. Flannel shirt. Foam coffee cup. Photos of grandchildren behind him. We spoke about my client for 10 minutes. He was friendly, efficient, knowledgeable. Then I casually shifted. Earl, between us, have you heard anything about Route 78 expansion? My clients keep asking. He didn't hesitate. No rumors. Nothing on the books. State's quiet right now. Too quick. Too smooth. Then he pivoted. How's your sister? Still marrying that Sterling boy? Nice family. I smiled. Very nice. I left. In the parking lot, I sat in my Ford Escape with both hands on the wheel. He had just lied to a licensed attorney in a public building. A public building with cameras. With timestamps. With audio. I sent Maya the meeting receipt and timecode. Her reply came within an hour. Asterisk, that's false statement evidence in a federal matter. Added to the file asterisk. I closed my phone. Mallister had smiled like a man certain of victory. Like someone watching a game he believed was already over. I let him believe it. Then I added another page to the folder. The prenup arrived October 22nd by overnight FedEx, sent from a Philadelphia law firm. Hannah brought it directly to my office the next morning. She placed it on my desk and sat across from me. 14 pages. 9 of them standard legal language. Then Section 4.2. Spouse Hannah Sterling shall convey or assign within 90 days of marriage any interest in real property in Berks County, Pennsylvania, including inheritance, gift, or familial transfer, to a jointly held LLC, in which Trent Sterling shall hold 51% controlling interest. Inheritance explicitly included. In plain terms, if Mom's farm passed to Hannah, it would legally become Trent's within 3 months. The entire scheme, written cleanly into contract language. Hannah, I said, you don't sign this. I already told him I would, she replied. At the ceremony. He liked that. Called it a trust gesture. I looked at her. You did what? I said I'd sign it in front of the priest. He said his lawyer will have it in his jacket pocket. I leaned back slowly. Hannah, do you understand what this is? She met my eyes. He's going to walk down the aisle carrying the document that convicts him. A pause. You scare me sometimes, she added. Good. She left the prenup on my desk and walked out. Back to her work in the next room. Steady. Unshaken. I sat there staring at the clause. Trent Sterling thought he was attending a wedding. In reality, he was carrying his own conviction inside his jacket. 53 days remained. Pause. I know some of you are listening while driving, folding laundry, or sitting in a kitchen where your mother might be nearby. If she is, give her a hug after this. And if anyone has ever made your mother feel small in a room she didn't deserve to be in, drop the word mom in the comments. I read every one. Subscribe if you want the wedding scene. It's the next 20 minutes. The last weekend of November, 8 days before the wedding, Mom arrived at my house unannounced. 4 p.m. Her hands were shaking when she stepped inside. Myra, she said, I can't do it. She sat at my kitchen table, coat still on, staring at the folder I had already placed there hours earlier. I can't watch Hannah walk down that aisle. I can't smile at his mother. I can't pretend. Her voice broke slightly. I want to call it off. I want to go to Hannah tonight and tell her to leave. I poured her coffee. Sat across from her. Mom, I said, I need to tell you everything. I laid it out. All 17 pages from Trent's drawer. The survey ribbons. The email chain with Whitfield Sr. Maya Caldwell. Sheriff Holland. Arrest timing. She read slowly. Sipped her coffee. Read again. Then she looked up. He really said I belong in a trailer park? Yes. She placed the folder down carefully, folded her hands, then leaned back slightly, and said the sentence that made her entirely herself again. Your father bought that back 47 in the spring of 1991, she said. He paid $1,100 an acre. We ate beans for 2 years. A pause. They will not have it. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. I sat there as my coffee went cold and watched my mother change, not into someone different, but into who she had always been before grief softened her edges. The woman who had walked into a bank in 2012 and renegotiated a syrup contract after 6 years of underpayment. The woman who had stood before a school board in 1998 and refused to move her daughters out of their district. The woman who had once made a county appraiser cry. I'll smile at her wedding, Mom said. I'll stand next to her at the altar. I'll wear pearls. And when you tell me to look toward the back of the church, I'll look. Mama, what does that mean? She touched the chain at her neck, thumb brushing the wedding band. That's where your father's family always sat. I'll know he's there. That was when I broke. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just quietly. Because I finally understood my mother was never waiting for instructions. She was the foundation everything else stood on. She reached across the table and took my hand. Hers were rough. Mine weren't. We stayed like that for 2 full minutes without speaking. Then she asked, calm as ever, what time do you need me on the 14th? 12:30, I'll pick you up. I'll be on the porch. And she was. She stood, put on her coat, and drove home. 8 days. 200 guests. 3 sterlings. 1 commissioner. 1 altar. The clock kept moving. The rehearsal dinner was Friday night. Sterling estate. 40 guests. Round table seating, calligraphy cards, lobster, crystal glassware, a 6-tier champagne tower. Trent stood before dessert, already 2 glasses deep. To my beautiful bride and her charming family, he said, swaying slightly. We're so excited to fold them into our portfolio. A pause. A grin. I mean, our family. Light laughter scattered around the table. Whitfield Sr. barely hid a smirk behind his glass. Rosalind placed a hand on Trent's arm. Soft pressure. The silent stopped talking. Hannah leaned in and kissed his cheek. But her eyes found mine across the room. Steady. Not angry. Just aware, like she'd already mapped every exit. I left at 10 o'clock. Mom had stayed 40 minutes, then driven back to the farm alone. On my way home, I slowed when I reached the eastern edge of her property. High beams cut across the back 47. There were 6 orange survey ribbons now. 3 more than July. And 3 of them were inside the fence line. On her land. 5 feet in. Intentional. Marked. Documented trespass. I parked on Cedar Hollow Road and walked out in my dress shoes. Photographed every stake. Logged coordinates. Sent everything to Maya at 11:47 p.m. Her reply came 6 minutes later. We have enough. Warrant signed tomorrow. Mal Lister picked up 1:55 p.m. church at 2 o'clock. I didn't sleep more than 4 hours. At 5:47 a.m., my phone buzzed again. Maya, Sheriff ready. The day had started. By 6 a.m., I was at my kitchen table with coffee and a legal pad. The checklist was already written. Maya entering church at 1:15 p.m., undercover as Hannah's college friend. Sheriff Holland staged half a mile from St. Andrews, unmarked unit, entry signal at 2 p.m. Mal Lister arrested at 1:55 p.m. in Reading. State DOT investigator ready to receive I-78 East memo immediately after arrest. Hannah wired, hidden mic embedded in her dress bodice. Prenup carried in bouquet bag. Mom picked up at 12:30 p.m. Pearls. Chain. Wedding band. And me, black dress, second pearl earrings, borrowed lipstick, and the same manila folder I had built since June. This folder was symbolic now. The originals were already distributed. Maya, FBI, DOT investigator. But I still carried it. Because some things don't get left behind. At 12:30, I pulled into the farm. Mom was waiting on the porch. Pearls at her throat. Wool coat. Navy dress underneath. She looked like royalty that never needed an audience. I opened the passenger door for her. St. Andrew's Episcopal sat on a hill in Chester Springs. Stone walls, vaulted ceiling, nave built for 200-plus guests, choir loft above the entrance, side sacristy door leading into the parish hall. We arrived at 1:10 p.m. Inside, the air smelled like beeswax and evergreen. The string quartet tuned softly. Guests filtered in. Front pew, groom's side, Whitfield Sr. and Rosalind already seated. Expensive coats. Nervous glances. Constant phone checking. Waiting for Earl. But Earl wasn't coming. Maya was already inside. Pew 12, navy dress, calm posture, eyes forward. One small nod as I passed. I returned it. Sheriff Holland was somewhere behind the sacristy door. I left Mom in the front row and kissed her cheek. Then I went to the bridal suite. Hannah stood in her dress, Vera Wong, ivory, simple structure. Bridesmaids moving around her like nervous satellites. She saw me in the mirror. He gave me the prenup this morning, she said quietly. Told me to put it in the bouquet bag. Sign after the vows. You have it? I asked. She tapped the velvet portfolio in her bouquet bag. And the wire? She nodded slightly. Maya checked. Audio's clean. I placed my hands on her shoulders. We met each other's eyes in the mirror. Hannah. Yeah. I'm proud of you. She nodded once. No tears. No breakdown. Just focus. Outside, the ceremony began. Trent entered at 1:58 p.m., smiling, adjusting his tie, unaware that his father's cousin had been arrested minutes earlier. At 2 o'clock sharp, the organ swelled. Hannah walked alone. She had promised me years ago she would never be given away again, not after our father died. She kept that promise. Slow. Steady. Bouquet in left hand. Velvet folder hidden inside. Mom stood in the front pew, thumb tracing the wedding band on her chain. Once. Twice. 3 times. Hannah reached the altar. Took Trent's hand. He smiled like a man who thought the story was already finished. The priest began. Then the formal declaration. If anyone here present knows any reason. Silence stretched. 2 seconds. 3. 4. Hannah turned, not to Trent, but to the entire church. 200 guests. Cameras lifting. Confusion spreading. Trent's smile cracked. Hannah. Her voice cut through everything. Before I say yes, I want to share something. Whitfield Sr. started to rise. Maya stood in pew 12. Hannah opened the manila folder. On October 22nd, she said clearly, her voice carrying through the church audio system, I received a prenuptial agreement requiring me to transfer inherited property in Berks County to a jointly controlled LLC, 51% owned by Trent Sterling. A murmur rolled through the room. Trent reached for her arm. She stepped back. Clean. Final. On August 19th, she continued, I found documents showing Sterling Development Group planned to acquire my mother's 47-acre farm for $3,200 per acre, then resell it as a right-of-way for the Pennsylvania Department of Transportation's future I-78 East Extension, an unannounced infrastructure project. Rosalind stood. What is she doing? Whitfield Sr. was already upright. Hannah stopped this. She didn't. The projected profit, she said, voice steady, was $8.4 million. Gasps spread like a shockwave. Phones rose. Recording started. She lifted one final page. Yellow legal paper. This, she said, is a handwritten note from Whitfield Sr.'s office. She paused just long enough for the church to fall completely silent. It reads, Earl gets 15%. Her eyes lifted. Earl Mallister, Commissioner of Berks County. And then she checked her watch. At 1:55 p.m. that afternoon, the FBI executed an arrest warrant at Commissioner Mallister's residence in Reading. He had already been in federal custody for 7 minutes. The church fell completely silent. Trent's mouth opened, then closed again without sound. Hannah folded the paper calmly and placed it on the altar rail. She turned to the priest. Father, I'm sorry. I'm canceling this wedding. I'm ending this engagement, and I'm doing it here because I needed 200 witnesses. The priest's face drained of color. He nodded once, slowly. Whitfield Sr. lunged toward the folder. He didn't make it 3 steps. Maya rose from pew 12 and walked into the center aisle. Her voice stayed level. She didn't need anything louder. Whitfield Sterling Sr., she said. I'm Special Agent Maya Caldwell with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, Public Corruption Unit. I have a warrant for your arrest for wire fraud, conspiracy to defraud the United States, honest services fraud, and bribery of a public official. Whitfield Sr. froze mid-step. His face turned brick red. This is a wedding, he said sharply. You can't. This is a wedding. I can, sir. The sacristy door opened. Sheriff Hollins stepped out in uniform, hat tucked under his arm. Two Berks County deputies followed behind him. Quiet movement. Precise. Controlled. The deputies guided Whitfield Sr. into the side aisle and turned him toward the wall. Maya turned to Trent. Trent Sterling, you are also under arrest for wire fraud, conspiracy to defraud the United States, and conspiracy to commit bribery. You have the right to remain silent. Trent looked around wildly, then locked onto his mother. Mom, he choked out. Mom, do something. Rosalind sank back into the front pew. Her hand rose to her mouth. Her diamond earrings caught the light spilling through the stained glass. She looked at her son. Just looked at him. Like a woman realizing there was nothing left to shield. She didn't speak. She didn't move. Sheriff Holland stepped to Rosalind. His voice lowered. Ma'am, you're a person of interest. We'll need to speak with you. She nodded once. No tears. No protest. Hannah stepped down from the altar and walked to the front pew. She took her mother's hand and stood between us in silence. A deputy escorted Rosalind toward the side exit. She had to pass the front pew. She stopped briefly beside Mom. Her mascara ran in thin streaks. Her hands trembled around her clutch. Eliza, she whispered, voice breaking. Please, this is a misunderstanding. Mom didn't answer. She just looked at her. That was all. Her hands stayed folded. Calloused fingers, pearl earrings, wedding band still hanging from the chain at her neck. Her thumb had stopped moving along it. It simply rested now. She didn't need words. I stepped forward one pace. My voice stayed soft, but the stone walls of St. Andrew's carried it clearly to every corner of the nave. My mother belongs wherever she chooses to stand. A pause. You're the one being escorted out. Silence dropped through the church. Rosalind blinked. Once. Twice. Her mouth opened, then closed again. The deputy touched her elbow. She turned. She walked. I didn't watch her leave. I looked at Mom instead. She was watching me. Her eyes were dry, but something behind them had returned, something I hadn't seen since the night before my father's funeral. Honey, she said quietly. That was it. Just that. Honey. I had spent 6 months building toward a single sentence. It lasted 5 seconds. It was enough. The clock had finally stopped. The church emptied in fragments. Some bridesmaids were crying openly. A few of Rosalind's gala board guests slipped out the back without speaking to anyone. They wouldn't return her calls again. I noticed it. I filed it away like everything else. Whitfield Sr. was escorted out the side door, head lowered, shoulders collapsed, smaller than he had ever looked. Trent was led down the center aisle. He was crying now. As he passed the front pew, he twisted his head toward Hannah. Betrayer, he spat. Sheriff Holland tightened his grip and kept him moving. Hannah didn't flinch. We left together. Mom. Hannah. Me. Through the front doors and down the stone steps of St. Andrew's. The air outside was cold and sharp. The grass was winter brown. The parking lot was half filled with phones recording, half filled with people pretending not to see. Maya met us at the Ford Escape. Reading PD picked up Mallister at 1:55, she said. He's already lawyering up. Whitfield Sr.'s attorney is on the phone with the U.S. Attorney's office. Trent is in the back of a Berks County cruiser. Then she looked at Hannah. That speech was clean. Professional. Hannah stood against the car in her wedding dress, mascara streaked, staring at the sky. She hadn't changed yet. She wouldn't for hours. She had walked herself down the aisle. And walked herself back. We drove 47 miles back through Berks County. Mom in the front seat. Hannah in the back, still in her Vera Wong. The car smelled like silk, cold air, and early morning coffee. Route 422 stretched through brown winter fields. The sun hung low. Shadows ran long across the road. Mom rolled down her window. Cold wind rushed in. She closed her eyes briefly and breathed it in. "He won't get the back 47, she said quietly. Not a question. A conclusion. Hannah leaned forward from the back seat. "I'm starving," she said. "Can we stop at the diner?" I laughed. Actually laughed for the first time in a week. "Yeah," I said. "Let's stop." Mom laughed too. One short breath of sound. Like someone surprised she still could. We stopped at Hilda's Diner on Route 23 outside Birdsboro. Hannah walked in still wearing her wedding dress. The hostess paused, looked between us and said, "Booth or table?" We chose a booth. Hilda herself came out 10 minutes later with 3 plates of pancakes and refused to take a bill. She kissed Mom on the head like it was the most natural thing in the world. One waitress hugged her on the way out. That was when I started crying. In February, the grand jury returned indictments on 8 federal counts against Whitfield Sterling Sr. He pleaded not guilty. Bail $2 million. Posted overnight. Trent was indicted the same week on 6 counts. No plea deal offered. In March, Commissioner Mal Lister resigned and was later indicted for bribery and false statements. In April, Sterling Development lost multiple state licenses. Their CFO flipped. The company fractured and restructured by summer. In May, PennDOT publicly announced the I-78 East extension, rerouted 3 miles north. Mom's farm was excluded. Officials called it a reassessment of feasibility. Nothing more. In June, Whitfield Sr. was convicted. 14 years federal. Trent took a plea 11 years. Mal Lister received 6 years and a permanent ban from public office. Rosalind was never charged. Lack of direct documentary evidence. She lost every board position quietly. By August, she had moved to Boca Raton. Hannah left Sterling circles entirely. She came to work in my office. Then she took the LSAT. Top 15 percentile. Law school followed. One Saturday in April, Mom walked the eastern fence line with trash bags and garden shears. She pulled every orange ribbon from the ground, bundled them, and carried them inside. She burned them in the wood stove with old maple syrup labels. By spring, the ash was gone, and tomatoes were growing in the back 47. Cherokee purples. One Sunday in May, I went to the farm. Mom was at the sink washing seedlings. Wedding band back on her finger. The chain was gone. "Sit down, honey," she said. "Have pie." We did. 20 minutes later, Hannah arrived with casseroles. We ate at the kitchen table while sunlight spilled across the sink. Mom looked at both of us, then said the sentence I will never forget. "Your father would be proud of all 3 of us, but mostly Hannah. She did the brave part." Here's what 6 months and 1 wedding taught me. If anyone ever looks at the person who raised you and decides she belongs somewhere smaller than where she stands, you don't whisper back. You build. You wait. And you let the truth speak in the room they thought they owned. That's the story. If your mom ever did for you what mine did for me, call her tonight.